It started as a moment so ordinary that no one present expected it to turn into something worth talking about, let alone remembering. A simple request, delivered casually, almost nervously, cut through the air. "Can you pretend to be my boyfriend for a while?" There was no dramatic build-up, no warning signs, just a sentence that landed heavier than intended. For a brief second, time appeared to pause as the weight of the question settled in. Then came the reply, half serious, half defensive, but entirely revealing. "Do we have to kiss too?" In that instant, what could have been dismissed as a harmless favor transformed into a situation charged with uncertainty, implication, and quiet tension. According to sources familiar with the exchange, the request was framed as temporary and practical rather than romantic. The intention, at least on the surface, was to solve an immediate problem, one involving appearances, expectations, and the unspoken pressure to present a certain image to the outside world. Such requests are increasingly common, particularly in social environments where being single is treated less as a personal choice and more as a problem to be explained. Still, the question that followed revealed something deeper than logistics. It exposed the fragile line between acting a part and living it. Observers note that the response was not dismissive, nor was it enthusiastic. Instead, it carried a cautious curiosity, suggesting awareness of what pretending could require. A fake relationship, even for a short period, often demands more than shared stories and coordinated presence. It asks for physical closeness, emotional availability, and public consistency. The mention of kissing was not a joke for effect, it was a boundary check, a moment of clarity disguised as humor. It forced both parties to confront what they were actually agreeing to. From a broader perspective, this interaction reflects a growing cultural pattern. In recent years, the idea of pretend relationships has moved from fictional tropes into everyday life. Social media, family gatherings, and professional events increasingly reward the appearance of stability and companionship. As a result, individuals sometimes seek temporary solutions that look convincing enough to satisfy external scrutiny. In these situations, the emotional cost is often underestimated at the outset. What makes this particular exchange noteworthy is the immediacy with which the emotional implications surfaced. Rather than negotiating terms or setting clear rules, the conversation jumped straight to the most intimate concern. This suggests that both individuals understood, consciously or not, that pretending affection can quickly blur into experiencing it. Even without intention, repeated closeness can create familiarity. As the story continued to circulate, attention shifted from the moment itself to the larger pattern it seemed to represent. What initially appeared to be a personal exchange began to reflect a wider social trend, one in which temporary, performative relationships are increasingly used as tools to navigate modern expectations. Analysts observing this shift suggest that such arrangements are less about deception and more about survival within environments that place value on relationship status as a measure of success, stability, or emotional maturity. Sources close to similar situations explain that requests to pretend are often rooted in pressure rather than desire. Family gatherings, social functions, and professional spaces can subtly or openly demand explanations for being single, transforming personal circumstances into public conversations. In these moments, the idea of borrowing companionship becomes a shortcut, offering immediate relief from questioning eyes and unsolicited advice. However, while the intention may be practical, the emotional consequences are rarely neutral. Relationship experts emphasize that even when both parties agree on the temporary nature of the arrangement, the human brain does not easily distinguish between performance and experience. Shared time, synchronized behavior, and mutual defense in social settings can create a sense of partnership that feels real regardless of the original agreement. Over time, these behaviors activate emotional responses that are difficult to control, especially when reinforced by physical closeness or affectionate gestures. The hesitation implied in the question about kissing has become a focal point for analysis. Physical affection is often seen as the defining line between friendship and romance. When that line is crossed, even under the label of acting, it introduces a layer of intimacy that can reframe the entire relationship. Psychologists note that the body responds to touch and closeness in ways that the mind cannot easily override. Chemical reactions associated with bonding do not recognize the word pretend, making emotional attachment a real possibility. Observers also point out that such arrangements can create asymmetrical risk. While both parties may agree to the same terms, they may not experience the situation in the same way. One individual may remain emotionally detached, viewing the act as a role to be played, while the other may gradually internalize the connection. This imbalance often goes unnoticed until the arrangement ends, at which point the emotional fallout becomes unavoidable. Social media culture has further normalized these dynamics. Curated images of couples, anniversaries, and shared milestones reinforce the idea that being partnered is a desirable default. In contrast, singlehood is often portrayed as temporary or incomplete. Under these conditions, pretending becomes less about lying and more about fitting in. Experts argue that this environment encourages people to prioritize appearance over emotional readiness, increasing the likelihood of situations where boundaries are tested without clear safeguards. Developing reports suggest that conversations like the one in question rarely include detailed agreements about limits, duration, or exit strategies. Instead, they rely on assumptions and mutual trust, both of which can shift as emotions evolve. The lack of structure makes it difficult to navigate moments of discomfort or attachment when they arise. What began as a shared understanding can quickly become a source of confusion, especially if one person starts to question whether the act is still an act. Mental health professionals caution that pretending to feel something can be more exhausting than openly acknowledging uncertainty. Maintaining consistency in behavior, tone, and affection requires emotional labor that is often underestimated. Over time, this effort can lead to stress, anxiety, or guilt, especially if one person feels responsible for protecting the other from emotional harm. The longer the arrangement lasts, the harder it becomes to separate obligation